Hey everyone, I'm Pat Fitzmaurice, managing editor of Betting Pros and Fantasy Pros, and I am going to run through my favorite player props for wildcard weekend. And week 18 was pretty good to us. We ended the regular season on a high note, going 6-2. That ended a 2-week losing streak and gave us some momentum heading into the NFL playoffs. So let's get to it. And just a reminder that all lines are courtesy of DraftKings as of Thursday afternoon. Here we go. Dak Prescott's over 1.5 touchdown passes. Prescott is playing the Buccaneers on Monday night, and this number was actually juiced slightly towards the under as of Thursday afternoon. So you could get the over at minus 110. And I'll take it. Prescott has thrown multiple touchdown passes in 8 of his last 10 starts. And in 4 of those 8 multiple TD games, he had 3 and not merely 2. He is facing a Buccaneers pass defense that gave up 29 touchdown passes this season. That's tied for second most in the league. And Tampa Bay is hard to run against, especially when Vita Vea, their defensive tackle, is healthy. Vea is healthy, so that might influence Dallas play calling when they get into the red zone. Maybe they look to go through the air rather than on the ground. I like Prescott to throw more than 1.5 touchdown passes. I think he throws multiple TDs in this one. Josh Allen, over 257.7 passing yards. It's kind of surprising to see Allen's yardage total set so low. In 2 previous starts against the Dolphins this season, he had 400 and 304 passing yards. And for the season, Allen has averaged 267.7 passing yards per game. The Dolphins are easier to pass against than to run against. And Miami is 25th in the league in DVOA against the pass and gave up the 5th most passing yards during the regular season. So, of course, weather is always a concern when Buffalo is playing at home in winter, but the forecast for this Sunday in Buffalo is pretty mild, actually. 31 degrees, sun, and a 4-mile-an-hour wind, which is a non-factor. The one concern here is that the Bills might be able to take their foot off the gas pedal late in the game if they get a big lead against the Dolphins, who are going to be quarterbacked by third-string rookie Skylar Thompson. Bills are favored by 13 in this one, and that number might go up even higher. So it's possible they kind of shut it down a little late in the game and let the running game do most of the work. But still, I think the over on Josh Allen at 257.5 passing yards is a very good percentage play nonetheless. Kenneth Walker, under 60.5 rushing yards. And if you give me a chance to bet on the San Francisco run defense, I'm going to take it every time. The 49ers have been nearly impregnable against the run all season. They have given up a league low 59.6 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. And the only individual player this season to run for 60 yards or more against San Francisco all year was Josh Jacobs, who ran for 69 yards against them in week 17. So Walker has averaged 26 carries a game over the last 3 weeks. He has been a workhorse for Seattle. But you wonder if they're going to keep slamming Walker into a brick wall if they cannot get the running game going against San Francisco. And I do think Seattle's going to have a hard time, as everyone else has, getting the running game going against San Francisco. And when we saw the 49ers beat the Seahawks in week 15 by a score of 21-13, Walker had 12 carries for 47 yards. So he didn't get a lot of work. And he was fairly efficient relative to other running backs against Seattle, averaging almost 4 yards per carry. But San Francisco's given up 3.3 yards per carry to running backs this season. I think they shut down Walker in this one. All right, I will get to the rest of my favorite player props for wildcard weekend in just a moment. But first, do you want to track all of your wagers in one place? Check out the Betting Pros pick tracker at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. It syncs up with your sports books to tally which picks hit and which ones miss, and it gives you a live look at what the public is doing. so you can use real-time tracking to determine which plays to make and which ones to fade. Get on the leaderboard and quickly become a sharp by using the free advice we have to offer at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. Okay, back to the player props. And how about Travis Etienne over 75.5 rushing yards? Yeah, that's kind of a big number. In fact, that is the highest total on the board, the highest rushing total on the board for wildcard weekend. I still like the over. Etienne had 7 carries for only 17 yards against Tennessee last week, but the Titans have a fierce run defense. Etienne's opponent this week, the Chargers, they do not in the least. The Chargers they gave up a league worst 5.6 yards per carry to opposing running backs this year. That is a pretty terrible number. And they've allowed opposing running backs to average 127.3 rushing yards a game against them, second most behind only the Texans. And yes, last week the Jaguars were forced to abandon the run against the Titans. But Etienne, in his 3 previous games, had cleared this number in all 3, averaging 98 rushing yards per game over that stretch. I think he smashes this number in a home game against a very bad Chargers run defense. All right, George Kittle over 44.5 receiving yards. Kittle gets another crack at a Seattle defense that he blowtorched for 93 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns less than a month ago in Week 15. Seattle has been absolutely helpless against tight ends this year. They've allowed 1,115 receiving yards to opposing tight ends, second most in the league. Kittle has seen at least 5 targets in each of his last 5 games, and he is averaging 9.2 yards per target over that span. Even with Deebo Samuel back for the 49ers this week to claim some of the targets from quarterback Brock Purdy, I still like Kittle's chances to surpass 44.5 receiving yards. All right, Austin Ekeler in maybe my favorite bet of the week, over 35.5 receiving yards for Austin Ekeler. So Eckler's been heavily involved in the passing game for the Chargers all season long with 107 catches for 722 yards. The Chargers might have to lean on Ekeler even more than usual this week if Mike Williams is not able to play or is limited. Williams sustained a back injury in Week 18, and as of Thursday, he has not been practicing. So he might be out. If so, Ekeler is probably going to get a few spillover targets. And Ekeler is facing a Jaguars defense that is easier to throw on. Easier to throw on than to run on. And Jacksonville has been especially susceptible to pass catching running backs this year. The Jags have given up 853 receiving yards to running backs, second most behind only the Raiders. And when Ekeler faced the Jaguars way back in Week 3, 8 catches for 48 yards. So I like Ekeler to go over 35.5 this week. And finally, a repeat pick from last week, Hayden Hurst under 31.5 receiving yards. One of my recommended props last week was Hurst under 30.5 receiving yards against the Ravens. And here we are again, Bengals versus Ravens. Revenge game for Hayden Hurst, but not a good revenge spot. As I mentioned last week, when Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have both been active together, the Bengals' big 2 wide receivers, Hurst has not done a whole lot. There have been 8 such games with Chase and Higgins both active, and Hurst has finished with under 30 receiving yards in 6 of those 8 games. He's going up against a Ravens defense that's been tough on tight ends this year. The Ravens have given up the 7th fewest receiving yards to opposing tight ends. So Hurst under 31.5 receiving yards. And let's just recap all the wagers this week. Dak Prescott over 1.5 touchdown passes. Josh Allen over 257.7 passing yards. Kenneth Walker under 60.5 rushing yards. Travis Etienne over 75.5 rushing yards. George Kittle over 44.5 receiving yards. Austin Ekeler over 35.5 receiving yards. And Hayden Hurst under 31.5 receiving yards. My friends, Here's wishing you the best of luck with all your wagering on wildcard weekend and throughout the NFL playoffs. We will be back next week for the best player props of the divisional round. Until then, good luck. Happy wagering.